A big point to, big thing to him is the concept of mere Christianity. The notion that in this country there was a broad consensus historically. It changed and broadened over time. It went sort of from an internal Protestant thing to a broader Protestant Catholic thing. But there was this lowest common denominator of Christianity. Amidst all the disagreements, all the Christian churches agreed on moral matters and on key kind of theological and anthropological matters. By anthropological, I mean what a human being is. And that played a critical role because he describes it as the invisible mortar that held this country together.
Which author is this?
Do that. Right at the beginning of the book. And because remember, the United States is a physically big country. And there was a lot bigger ones when we didn't have the internet and telephones and airplanes. Imagine how big this country seemed if you were Alexis de Tocqueville, traveling around, how long it would take you to get from, say, Boston to even somewhere as relatively close as New York, much less, go to Cincinnati. It was big. You had these individual states with strong local identities. The United States was an ethnically and racially mixed society. But none, and it was not obvious that this would or could hold together. Tocqueville ruminates in a part we've read that the thing is just going to get too big to hold together and break into parts. But the point to do that is one of the things that held us together. You need that broad consensus. You need that commonality to provide a sense of like-mindedness, to provide a common language to talk to one another, to provide a sense of solidarity. And that was provided by Christianity. I would add that Christianity, certainly in Dufat, doesn't think it is the only thing. There are other factors, like, for example, a common language. But nonetheless, Christianity played the preeminent role there. And he talks about Christianity as being a religion of a certain kind. It is a religion of mystery and of paradox. It has a lot of both ends rather than either or. Is God one or many? Oh, he's both. One God, three persons. Is Jesus God or is he man? Oh, he's both. Both and. Christianity tries to pull these things together. And it creates an intellectual structure of immense complexity. And with many, many internal tensions and paradoxes. In saving your life, you lose it. In giving, you receive. In dying, you live eternally. It is just full of these kinds of things, which theologians, we professionally call mysteries. Non-theological types tend to call them paradoxes. And so this complexity, and he thinks the complexity, as he's going to suggest in a bit, was critically important to making America work, to holding this country together. A simpler religion might not have been able to do that. Of course, we'll never know, because you can't run that experiment again. Then he turns attention to the current day. And again, he's writing circa 2010. That's to say that's more than 15 years ago, right? And the landscape looked a little different back then. He spends relatively little time on the nuns, which is the big topic of conversation today. But nonetheless, in his day, he argues there is a debate between people who think America is having problems because it's too religious, and people think America is having problems because it is not religious enough. His response is, we're having problems because we're religious, but we're religious in the wrong way. We're religious in a way that undermines democratic governance rather than reinforces it. A religion that encourages the pathologies that Tocqueville identified. Tocqueville very much, you've done the reading on his mind. Religion that embodies the pathologies Tocqueville talked about, and it promotes and encourages those pathologies. Christianity acted to check them. So what you see today on the landscape is the old mere Christianity is still around and tens of millions of people believe in it. But there is this huge other presence in American culture. The groups that comprise this, or the movements that comprise the rest, the other here in American culture, generally call themselves Christian. Not all of them, but most of them. But they are Christian in a way that deviates from mere Christianity. They represent a simplified, oversimplified form of Christianity that deviates from what Christianity has historically believed, what Christianity has historically meant. These movements are moving are kind of filling the vacuum. We good? And then the next step, okay, he begins discussing these movements, right? All by way of review. Number one, we have, my note simply says, I don't have the book open, the new Jesus. I think it's the quest for a new Jesus, or something like that. Oh, one other thing before I launch into that. In response to this situation, going back, I skipped over this in my notes, and I numbered it 2 in red, but I still skipped it. The accommodationists and the resistors, right? Confronted with this, some people say we need to develop a new Christianity, the kind of people today will like more, will be more attractive to people today. Let's go with the flow, not against it. Other people say, no, reassert what's true, what we believe is true. In any case, and then he talks about the 1950s and whatnot, and I won't repeat that again. We've all heard about Fulton Sheen. We did a book on Martin Luther King. So we've been through that. So it goes into these aberrant forms of Christianity. First one is chapter 5, Lost in the Gospels. And here he's addressing a broader phenomenon. From time to time, if you follow religion news in the media, a story will pop up about some new development. This hitherto unknown gospel. This hitherto unremembered version of Christianity. You get these reports popping out every few years, and every once in a while, they cause a media blip. You'll get a lot of news coverage for a week or two about them, then the stories will disappear. But what makes those stories interesting is they say we have discovered an older, truer form of Christianity than the Christianity we know, than what Christianity historically began. This gives us a new insight into who Jesus was, what he taught, what Christianity is all about. Invariably, he says, when you analyze it closely, there are serious problems. Many of these documents that purport to tell us about the origin of Christianity are hundreds of years older than the contents of the New Testament. They're not eyewitness accounts. They're 200-300 years down the road from the advent of Christianity. Older documents, in some cases, there are translation problems. In some cases, they show themselves to be intentionally works of fiction. they leave you back where you started. There's no reason to take any of this more seriously than what you see in the New Testament. Okay? If anything, there's a reason to take it less seriously, given the time frame and whatnot, the amount of time that had passed. Likewise, he takes us to a habit, the thing that's become fashionable among intellectuals, some of whom have BAs, some of which have more, and stuff. You know what PhD stands for, don't you?
Philosophy.
Oh yeah, Doctor of Philosophy. But my father used to say my degree stood for piled higher and deeper. Think about that. That was funny. That was a joke he used to tell. See, I thought that was really hysterical. I guess it isn't my day. Moving on quickly, attempting to save face. You get these new accounts of Christianity. A writer says, well, we've misunderstood Christianity. The message is really this. You get these lives of Jesus who show us a very different Jesus than what appears in the Gospels and what appear in the New Testament. One example of this, I mentioned that he gives a lot of examples, was Thomas Jefferson, who late in life literally went through the New Testament and cut out what he didn't believe in, what he didn't think was Jesus, and left the rest behind. He created a new version of Christianity that he thinks is better and truer than what has existed historically. There was a fashion in the 19th century, people writing new lives of Jesus. I'll tell you what the life of Jesus was really like. And as one critic pointed out, I read you the passage last time, one of the oddities of these lives of Jesus is they turn out to be very autobiographical. It turns out the real true Jesus thinks exactly the way the author does, believes everything that the author believes, thinks like the author thinks. Raising the question, is this a search for truth, or is this a search for validation of pre-existing beliefs and pre-existing doctrines? So you have these new Jesuses sticking around. They come in very different forms, but what unites them is simplification, dissolving the paradoxes, giving up on one half of the tension, no longer saying Jesus is God and man, saying he's man or saying he's God. No longer saying God is 3 in 1, God is 1. They're stripped down, they're simplified. That has a lot, you could say a lot of positive things about things, nice and simple and clean, but it gives you a greatly simplified intellectual structure there, and one that seems largely to be designed to make the author more comfortable, to validate the author's own concerns and preoccupations and whatnot. So you have that. Then you get the prosperity gospel, my friend and yours, Joel Osteen, right? And he cites other examples. He walks you through an intellectual genealogy of Osteen. He didn't come out of nowhere. There was a tradition of these kind of preachers and stuff from which he emerged. He's just today the most visible and well-known and whatnot. The message of this kind of Christianity is believe in God and you'll be taken care of. Life is going to be good. Your problems are going to fade away. Your difficulties are going to disappear. Work with God and he will take good care of you. Okay? You will be living your best life. Again, the problem here is it seems flatly incompatible with traditional Christianity, which is highly critical of materialism, highly critical of the accumulation of worldly goods, urges people to turn away from material goods and focus on spiritual goods, that embraces renunciation and suffering. Pick up your cross and follow me. Doesn't sound like an invitation to a big party. Sounds like you're heading towards some pain, because you know where that takes you. So what's being presented there are very simplified visions that really rip a lot of the guts out of traditional Christianity, the self-denial, the sacrifice. I mean, all those things are very essential. If you don't have them, you're dealing with an entirely different religion. I'm trying to find a quote here for you, and I'm hoping I remembered the page. I did. Can't remember if I read you this or not. 205. Let's see. The prosperity gospel, on the very top of the page, places an emphasis on the social utility of belief and an eagerness to define spiritual success in worldly terms. A hint of utopianism and a binding naivete about human nature. At its best, the prosperity gospel can be well-meaning, open-handed, and personally empowering. And it thrives as few other forms of Christianity, of Christian faith do in the soil of modernity. Like many forms of liberal Christianity, the marriage of God and mammon half expects somehow to undo the fall through the beneficence of providence and the magic of free markets. Its emphasis on the virtues of prosperity, it risks losing something essential to Christianity. Skipping to Easter, you might say, without lingering at the foot of the cross. And at the end of the next paragraph, I think I did read you, at least if my memory is working, in the form of the prosperity gospel makes risk turning Christianity into an appendage of Americanism, a useful metaphysical thread for a capitalist society's social fabric. But a faith that's bound, perhaps fatally, to the rise and fall of the gross national product. Fair enough? You guys tired today? You were perkier last week.
No.
What?
Sorry about that.
Leave the humor to the professionals. I thought it was very well done. In any case, number 4. Next you have, actually I don't remember the name, my notes don't say. The God Within. That's what the God Within. And this to me is the most, all these things are interesting, but I think this is particularly interesting. Yes?
I actually read the book of one of the guys that he talks about.
Okay, very good there. Okay. We'll have to talk about that sometime, what he had to say. And the God Within, remember, what is the name of the book? Eat, Pray, or something. I don't have the book. Oh, but we talked about that last time. But it's sort of interesting because it gives you a vision that is pantheistic. Because it turns out part of it is we are all part of God. There's a spark of divinity within each of us. Okay? So it's strikingly pantheistic. Everything and everyone is God. Everything and everyone is divine. Likewise, it's radically individualistic. They actually use the term cherry pick. Just look out there at all the religions and grab whatever you like. There's no need to be loyal and committed to any faith tradition. Just look out there. They all have goodies there. It's like a big menu. And just order what works for you. Order where it's highly individualistic. And it has no emphasis on, you might say, asceticism, renunciation, self-denial. It's also highly therapeutic. And we talked about Philip Reeve and the triumph of the therapeutic last time, did we not? And Philip Reeve predicted, writing in the 60s, a sociologist studying these things, that American religion would take a therapeutic turn, meaning it would cease understanding itself as a search for truth, and instead understand itself as a search for peace of mind, happiness, self-esteem. It would less be about, kind of getting us right with God and kind of getting right with ourselves, accepting ourselves and valuing ourselves and things like that. And you see all the kind of that terminology in the therapeutic part and things like that. And this has become a huge factor in the culture. And he takes us on to discuss moralistic therapeutic deism. It almost slipped away from me there. Let me try to find the relevant passage. I'm way past it. Okay, I went past it. Here we go. It's over on 223 and 222. It goes on for several pages. And I would urge you to scrutinize those carefully. And what are the hallmarks of this belief? This kind of belief system? One, God exists, who created and ordered the world and watches over things. God wants people to be good, nice and fair. The goal of life is to be happy and feel good about oneself. God does not need to be particularly involved except when you have a problem. Good people go to heaven when they die. Now, let me just add to avoid confusion. There's no such church, if you look it up, a church of moralistic therapeutic deism. You will not find that. It's a religious orientation that goes in and colonizes, as he explains, existing religious traditions. So you get a Presbyterian version, a Methodist version, a Baptist version, a Catholic version, so on and so forth. It sort of enters into existing religious traditions and remakes them in accordance with its version of the truth. And he talks a lot about, I won't belabor it all, how you want to talk to people who are concerned about social atomization, the growth of individuals and the disintegration of social institutions. Probably most of us here have read Putnam and other things in that vein. Well, this is certainly an accelerant to that trend. The emphasis is do what feels right to you. There are no demands on you other than kind of do what feels good. Do what makes you happy. So there's no real sense of obligation or duty or commitment. It's very much a do your own thing ethic. And if your current set of responsibilities don't please you, if they're making you miserable, what do? You chuck them and find a set of alternative commitments. There are no here binding commitments. They're all non-binding and move away from them whenever they make you happy. It feeds very dramatically into materialism. Right, turns out what makes most people happy are, tours of Europe and huge houses and expensive cars and stuff. So it kind of feeds into the overall materialism of the culture. And it isn't really demanding. It places no demands on people and whatnot. It's all about just feeling good and doing your own thing. It's a really kind of thin thing. There's not a lot of content there. Fair enough? We talked about all of them, and I guess we move on now. Let me see. The next one is, my notes say the next one is finally. So, next one's the sitting on the hill. the city on the hill. Okay? And here he's talking about in the city on the hill. Where is he? He's talking about Christian heresy, he says. That's one of these deviant forms of Christianity. I'm on page 244 near the end. So that's before the time you get the gap there for the next section. He says this is a heresy that increasingly disfigures our politics on the left and right alike. The heresy of American nationalism. Okay? And you with me, Isabel? I see confusion.
I am with you.
Okay, there we go. Now, note a couple things before we move on and explore what this is and things. Note this is a phenomenon, he argues, that's become ubiquitous in our culture, in our political culture. It's all over the place. Not that everyone partakes in it or anything, but it is a huge presence in our culture, and it has different versions. We'll talk about some of the varieties. But what he wants to emphasize right from the outset is that it's neither a left wing nor a right wing phenomenon. This is found both on the right and the left of the political spectrum. And people on both ends tend to accuse the other of this when they are both guilty. Fair enough? Got that? Next stop. If you look back for most of human history, and you look at the religious scene, you discover that religion has sort of a local focus. It's locally based. Go back to ancient times. Each city had its own gods and special gods. These are our gods. They belong to us, and we have a special relationship with them. The next city, well, we have these other gods. We have a relationship with them, and so on and so forth, until you get a situation where they're bickering over whose god is stronger and who has a better god. But religion historically has been very much locally based. It's bound up with a particular political order, or with a particular city, or with a particular tribe, or with a particular ethnic group. It is connected with something. It is connecting with something local. And whatnot. What's weird and aberrant, or tends to be, are these universal religions that eventually appear. They come to the game late. These particularist religions, sort of had the turf to themselves. They were the only game in town, an infinite number of different forms of that. But then something new and different, a whole different approach to religion, comes as these transcendent religions. These universal religions, let me say that. Now, I already kind of gave my next move away. This takes us back to Smith, immanent versus transcendent religion. Back in ancient times, actually until fairly recently historically, these local particularistic religions tended to be religions of immanence. The gods were intracosmic. The gods dwell right here with us in our territory. Here are the borders where they live. We can give you a location. See that mountain over there? They're up there. Okay? These universal religions, it differs from religion to religion, but tend to have a very transcendental emphasis. God is beyond the cosmos. You could say, and from the point of view of the transcendent religiosity, God is everywhere, but at the same point you can say God's nowhere. Nowhere in the sense of he's not in the world. He is not located in the world of space and time. He may create it, he may sustain it, he may be its foundation. But he is not bound by it. He transcends. At the same time, these localist religion, these particular religions, which he had a name for it, I didn't have to keep thinking. They tended to closely fuse together two things, as a matter of fact, to render them indistinguishable. What might these two things be, class? What might these two things be? Politics and religion, right? All the way back to the beginning, we talked about the ancient empires, we talked about the ancient polis. Okay, where politics and religion not simply are fused together. Even saying that distorts it. They were not distinguished. It's sort of like, I don't know, do you ever know what a Cuisinart is? It's a thing you can use like to take vegetables and make them into mush. How's that? I'm not real adept with kitchen stuff. I order pizza. So, a staple of my diet. In any case, got a good pizzeria in New Braunfels, but I can't find an excuse to slip down there and eat there. Very frustrating.
If you want to, that's an excuse.
I'm a man of many responsibilities. But in any case, these things, you throw all these vegetables into the Cuisinart and sort of purees all of them. And at the end, you have this one giant thing, like pudding, but with them all mingled, to get so mingled together. They've lost their individual identities. That was religion and politics, as we've talked about, in the ancient world. Okay, so he says on 245, first full paragraph, actually beginning of the page. Religion, very top line, religion has long found its most natural expression through the cults of a particular place or clan or ethnic group, or later a particular city or nation state. Even if they supposedly represented a more universal principle, the gods of the ancient world were usually local gods, bound to a particular region or tribe or city, invoked as protectors for parochial religions, and hailed as defenders of specific people. This meant there could be no real separation between religion and politics. At the most, in societies that deified their rulers, it meant there was no separation at all between the political structure and the gods themselves. And he goes on in that vein for a while. Okay? So these universal religions come along, and a long contest ensues between these local particularist religiosities and the universal religion. Okay? At least in the Western world, in Western civilization, the winner of the struggle is universal religion. It vanquishes the particularist religions. Particularly because it doesn't completely disappear. Obviously, there are always dissenters out there, small numbers of people who believe in their local God still, or maybe believe in their local God and the universal God at the same time. There are also ways of trying to kind of reconcile the two. For example, Mexico, Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? Providing, she sort of belongs to them, to their body politic, not just to everyone, indistinguishably. But in any case, the emergence of these universal religions create a political problem. They tend to create they tend to create a vacuum, because the question is, okay, I'm in this personal relationship with God or this higher being. Okay? That's cool. I got my relationship there. It's horizontal. What about going this way? Okay, in the sense that, where does it leave my body, my family? Remember, ancestor worship is an important element in all the ancient religions. Where does it leave my tribe? Where does it leave my ethnicity? Where does it leave my city? Does God not care about them? Do they not matter to God? Are they insignificant? How can that be? People have, this creates a problem for people because they want, in some sense, to sacralize the particular. They want their family to have some sort of spiritual significance, not simply be evacuated of all spiritual meaning. They want same thing of their ethnicity, same thing of their tribe. So you get, it creates, again, this vacuum in the middle of politics, and relatedly, it creates that psychological vacuum, creates a political vacuum now. What is it that legitimates, shall we say, the King of France? The French body politic. We're each in a vertical relationship with God. But what about this authority structure that's sitting around in the society that I inhabit? Does it have some kind of mandate for God? Does it no longer matter at all? Do we just forget about that kind of thing? So it creates this series of vacuums and series of tensions in political life. Those who did the problem of power class with me, and there are at least a couple, hopefully remember Vogtman discussing that in his content, because he covers some of the same ground. Okay, so people begin looking around and trying to find a way to kind of attach transcendent meaning, connect up this transcendent God with their locality, with their family, with their tribe. It just doesn't seem right that those things sit there and are different to God. They're not special to God. God doesn't care about them. They don't have some intrinsic value in and of themselves in the kind of divine economy of salvation. So we got to find a way to kind of sacralize them a little bit, to give them a role. And so we're talking in Western civilization now. People begin looking at the holy book of Western civilization, which is called the, one word begins with a B, Bible. And they start at the beginning with the book of Genesis. And they begin reading through the Bible. And lo and behold, they encounter something. They encounter a people there who are special to God. A chosen people who God has picked out from everyone else to have this special relationship with, and this special friendship with, and this special closeness to. These guys have won the divine lottery, as it were. That's just, that's pretty cool, isn't it? And other people on the outside say, hey, what about us? What about our body politic? What about my ethnic group? So what people have is what Dutham calls Jew envy. They're envious that the Jews are given this special status and this special relationship. And the way they kind of deal with that is by trying in some way, shape, or form to displace the Jews. In the sense that, say, we are a special people. We are in a new relationship with God. We're extra special too. We're at least as important as those guys, maybe more important. And this takes place in the context, we're going to be a lot of complicated history here to set up our American analysis. But this takes place in the context of the rise of the early modern nation state. So remember in the Middle Ages, there were no nation states. Europe was completely decentralized. Sure, you had a guy who says, I'm the Holy Roman Emperor. he has about as much authority as you and I do, so over the Holy Roman Empire. Same thing, yeah. Yeah, medieval, you're very decentralized. Now you get these nation states emerging. You get this thing called France. The people are the Franks, or the Gauls, as they're sometimes called. They begin saying, well, you know, we think we might be God's chosen people too. And then the English say it, and then the Spanish say it. And there is a copious body of literature each time a nation state sort of pops out of the womb of medieval Europe, because they don't all emerge at once. They claim for themselves the status of a chosen people, God's special people with a mission in the world. We've been deputized. But this poses a political problem because I'm on a mission from God. No, I'm on a mission. No, I'm on a mission. They're all claiming the same title. They can't all be chosen people, then what good is it to be a chosen people? Then everyone's chosen, you're not special anymore. We want to be special. We want to be special. So there's an effort, sometimes fancy terminology that we really need to worry about. The redivinization of politics. The redivinization of politics. And you see this play out in early modern Europe, both in terms of society's self-understanding. They start thinking of themselves in this way. Yeah, we're special. We're unique to God. We're chosen. We're the new Israelites. But you also see it. You see it in that way in terms of people's self-consciousness, self-understanding. But you also see it institutionally. Okay, in that you get a kind of reattachment of religion and politics. Because what happens is this. Let's say you're sitting in France. We'll say circa 1600, just picking a day. Okay? You believe, right? France is an ethnic, not ethnically. What is France religiously? Was a Catholic nation. The Catholic Church is a universal church, open to people all times, all places. It's universal. It has sort of its own institutional order, transcending political boundaries and loyalties and whatnot. But so yeah, that goes. But all of a sudden, the King of France announces, "Well, I'm really the Pope's there, and he's great, and he's the boss. But really, the day-to-day stuff that goes to the king." You see that even in the Catholic countries, where the kings basically take over the church and act as sort of Pope in their own realm, frequently fighting with the Pope in Rome, who contests their authority. But you see it even more vivid in France. It's called Gallicanism. There are different versions of it in different countries, where kind of the Catholic Church in France becomes an embodiment of French ethnicity. It becomes a particular separate church in effect, if not in theory. In fact, in the Protestant countries, see the same thing. English Reformation occurs. Who's the head of the church now? King. There's not even the Pope there, theoretically, on the other side of the mountain. We try not to think about because he could be a problem for us. King is the head. He's become king and Pope. You see that in all the Protestant little principalities in Germany. The rulers take over the Protestant churches till they become mere extensions of the government. But eventually this causes all sorts of massive conflict and bloodshed. And eventually the agreement becomes to try to establish some order of peace. The ruler decides the religion and controls the religion of the society. So in this principality, your rulers are Lutheran. You people out there got to be Lutherans now, and you got to listen to me. I speak for Lutheranism. Right on down the road. There's all sorts of books written on this phenomenon, the vast conflicts that it caused. And these new kind of, you want to call them tribal, somebody referred to them as the new, what was the phrase he used? Was a cool phrase. I'm not doing it right. The local tribes of the nation state. Each nation has its own tribe. Note they're ethnically based. Right? Church in France is for French people. If you're not French, you don't really belong here in our church. You're an outsider because we've been chosen. You haven't. Okay, if you're not French. These churches tend to be very much based ethnically. Ethnicity matters. It's very central to their identity. Fair enough? And this wreaks all sorts of havoc in early modern England, early modern Europe, figuring this all out. I'm going to talk about some English stuff, and I will go down that bunny trail. You following me? Because this is in the book. I haven't read you any quotes here at this point. I'll find you some quotes, I guess, later, but I was on a roll, and I didn't want to interrupt myself. Now we move across the ocean. Here we finally come home to the good old U.S. of A. The good old U.S. of A. Well, the interesting thing, so now you have the American nation state emerges, right? So the English have their nation state and the French, etc. Now we have our nation state. But our nation state is a little bit different from their nation state. But it's different because we are a multi-ethnic society from almost the get-go. Sure, the early settlers were predominantly English, but a lot of Germans came over in the 1600s, and a lot of people from other places. And by the time you get to say 1750, 18, there's huge non-English population. Irish. We tend to think of Irish and English as going together, but actually they were fierce enemies. They hated one another. You got this massive influx of the Irish. You got the Germans populating up in Minnesota and those areas, the upper Midwest. You got all those crazy Swedes in Minnesota and whatnot. So you have this multi-ethnic country. Okay. So we can't claim a special role based on ethnicity. Well, the interesting things here is America sort of asserts, or seems to assert, some kind of universalism. Right? We're asserting these beliefs and values that apply to people at all times and in all places. We hold these truths to be self-evident. They're not just for Americans. They're for other people. They're for other people as well. And Americans from almost the get-go, in fact, the Puritans were really into the Bible and particularly the Old Testament, thought of themselves as a chosen people. But the choice isn't ethnic. It's hard to explain because America doesn't fit the categories. But it's not ethnic, it's sort of cultural, political. But we see ourselves very much as one people, do we not? Okay, one united people. And we tend to hang on to that, and we tend to embrace that notion of, universe, we are one people, we are chosen people. I'm reading what I taught. And from the earliest settlers, the earliest people settling from Europe, we tend to think of ourselves as God's new Israel. The Puritans used all sorts of biblical language to refer to America. And it spread well beyond the Puritans. There's an interesting book, if you want to look at it at some point, that I used to assign in this class. but got to the point where I was signing like 9 or 10 books, and people seemed not to be doing all the reading, although I thought I was doing them a favor by improving the quality of their education, but that's just me. Book was called Redeemer Nation by Ernest Lee Tuvison, Tuveson. I had a student who got mad at me when I told him I wasn't offering it. You know, the next cycle after he had me that took too much time and stuff, and he was like, but that was the best book. I had the class vote, they didn't think that was the best book. But in any case, okay? So Americans have this strong tendency to think of themselves as a chosen people. Okay, so let's look back at page 246. No, 248, I'm sorry. My eyes are just getting worse, you know, it's almost like I'm getting old or something. You let my children laugh, and I keep telling them, remember this moment. It will come to you. I still remember laughing at my dad. And now I think, God, I am him. Okay? Turn up the lights, I can't see. Why is that print so small? How do you read that stuff? Why do they make tiny print in books? And God help us, I'm there. Okay, page 248. We can be grateful that the American story hasn't opened into such abysses. On these shores, classic ethno-nationalism has been swallowed up by a new and different understanding of the nation-state, one that resembles the self-understanding of Christianity itself. Like Gentiles entering the church, every race and tribe is expected to leave its particular totems and traditions behind when it enters the democratic empire of the New World. As with the pagans who turned Christian, the old deities of ethnicity must be set aside in favor of a more universal human brotherhood. And skipping down to the last paragraph on the page, but if the lack of blood and soil tradition has weakened the temptation, so as imagining one's tribe as God's chosen people, the obvious resemblance between America and the Christian church, both pan-ethnic, both universalizing bodies that promise to create a new man out of the old one and redeem a fallen and corrupt world, has tempted many Americans to regard the United States as a whole, as a new Israel, a holy nation, a people set apart. This inclination has been woven into every chapter of our history, including the Puritan errand in the wilderness, down to the presidential campaign of Barack Obama. The language of our politics casts the American story in explicitly religious terms. We're a promised land, and our people, our government, a new order for the ages, with a manifest destiny defined by American exceptionalism. This can easily shade from a generic providentialism in presidential speeches. May God bless you. And may God continue to bless the United States of America into something more powerful and comprehensive of faith in Americanism and our mission and destiny and God's influence therein that David Galerner describes as the fourth great religion. This sense of the American narrative as a continuation of the biblical story transcends ethnic divisions. Okay? So you have America kind of sacralizing itself, redivinizing itself, asserting, okay, we are the chosen people of God, and we're here to do God's work. We're an exceptional nation. We're set apart. We have a mission, and we plan on doing that mission. Now, are we together? Now, what Duthout says, okay, this isn't necessarily something bad or dangerous. It isn't necessarily something bad or dangerous. It's an attempt to kind of link up our political order with the divine. Going back to what we talked about earlier, placing it in this ultimate scheme, ultimate divine scheme of reality, that we as, not just we as separate atomized individuals, but we as a people matter and have some significance and have some sort of special relationship with God. But carried too far, he says, this can have bad results. Up to this point, it's sort of compatible in principle with Christianity, but if you push it a little bit, it's real easy to cross a line. It's real easy to cross the line. And he takes us to our friend John Winthrop. I know that name rings a bell, but he's quoted both by Tocqueville and by Marsden. He was one of the early colonists, and on his way on the ship, on its way over to America, he gave arguably the most famous sermon in American history. And he speaks of us not as a shining city on a hill. We're going to settle this new country. We shall be a city on a hill. We'll be like a city on a hill. Okay? Give me a minute to catch up here. We tend, when we use that phrase, how do we tend to say it? We tend to insert a word that isn't there in the original. Shining city on a hill, right? We're special. We're, our city's made of gold and everything's great there. And everything's better than it is everywhere else. See, we're special. God has rewarded us in this way. But as he points, but in the original sermon, shining didn't appear. There's no reference to it. We're a city on the hill. And what that meant in the original context isn't that we're cool. It's that everyone is going to have their eyes on us. Everyone's going to be looking at us. You know what? Because they think we're crazy people. We sailed across this ocean, risking our lives. Really, like 1/3 of the ship's crossing go down and you die. Okay. To go to this wilderness and try to carve a society out of nothing, from scratch. This is pretty crazy stuff. It's not the thing people typically do. Let's risk our lives on a new journey, on a long, dangerous journey, and if we survive, build a new civilization in this raw, undiscovered, untamed wilderness. But we're doing this why? This is what we're doing it for a religious reason. This is our service to God. We're serving God. We believe He has asked us to do this. And as good disciples, we will do what He tells us. But we'll be a shining city on a hill because people are going to know what we're attempting. They're going to know what we're trying to do. We've said we're around here to build a new and better type of society. A wonderful new place. A truly godly society. A society that follows God's laws. Okay? If we do this right, we're going to change the course of human history. If we screw this up, we will be a laughing stock. And it will pass from generation to generation. These idiots who attempted this great enterprise and thoroughly screwed it up. Who told us, look at us, we're going to do something fantastic. And then couldn't do much of anything. The point is, the city on the hill meant people are going to be looking at what we do. God is going to be seeing what we do. Everyone else is going to see what we do. And what we do is going to have a big impact, because if we screw this up, if this is a disaster, people are going to laugh at us and laugh at our religion and not take God's command seriously. We do this right. We've pleased God, and we've set an example that other people will follow. So someday all the world will be like America. Remember you John Locke from earlier? This is an aside. Quote from John Locke: in the beginning all the world was America. I love that passage in Locke. In any case, the temptation is to add the word shining and to forget about certain things. To forget that we are imperfect human beings. To forget that we are fallen. To forget that we are sinners. Those things are core features of Christianity. We are all sinned, to quote the old McGuffey reader, in Adam's sin we sinned all. We are all sinners. We're all untrustworthy. We all fail the test when push comes to shove. No one among us is completely righteous. And we have to remember that's who we are. We have to not be proud. Look at us, we're great, we're great, we're great. We have to be humble and have humility and recognize that we're prone to make mistakes, that our judgments are sometimes mistaken, sometimes badly mistaken, that as much as we want to kind of do God's will, our self-interest, our limitations, our failure of imagination prevents us from doing that. But here sort of is the rub for do that. The tendency is to insert the word shining and forget about all the stuff about being fallen and being imperfect, to start fantasizing that we are going to build the kingdom of God here on earth. God can just stand back and watch. We got this. We will build his kingdom for us right here and now. Now, Amanda and Kate, you both had the Vogelin course with me, right? I'm remembering correctly. Luke, you did too, right? Jane certainly did.
No.
You never took that one with me?
No, I sat on that one.
Okay, you sat in on that one, okay. That was a good class. But in any case, does this remind you of Vogelin? What was Vogelin's famous phrase? His students would wear a t-shirt and sweatshirt saying that on the campus of Notre Dame in the 1960s when he came back from her. Is this it?
Immanentize the echelon.
Eschaton, right, exactly. Thank you, Kim. Don't immanentize the eschaton. By the way, Amanda, that was a great looking down move. Amanda quickly averted her eyes. I forgot she was there for a moment. I completely forgot her. Immanentize the eschaton. Is a fancy phrase. You don't need to worry about that, but it's conceptually more precise than building heaven on earth. So that this pride, this overweening pride that can result, this confusion of us and God, this failure to recognize we're sinners, can lead to crazy and destructive actions. And sometimes in American history, it has done just that. I'm trying to look, where does he get into this? Well, but let's just look at this preliminary quote. On 250, last full quote on the page. Talking about the compatibility of this with the Christian faith. Such a compatibility is possible only if the belief in exceptionalism is tempered by a realism about the mysteries of providence and the limits of human perfectibility. Christian orthodoxy makes room for particular loves and loyalties, but not for myths of national innocence or fantasies about building the kingdom of God on earth. Love of country is one thing, chauvinism and utopianism are another. And he identifies two different forms of this sort of mind virus, two different versions of this. The first one is Messianism. It's discussed on page 254. down the bottom of the page. Okay? One temptation, he says, last paragraph on the page, is Messianism. Not content with the possibility that God has particularly favored the United States, the Messianic view holds that American democracy can actually fulfill God's purposes on earth, whether by building the New Jerusalem at home or by spreading the blessings of liberty to every race and overseas. 255, second line. Piggybacking on the parallels between American Universalism and Christian Universalism. Messianic Americanism turns liberal democracy into a religion unto itself, capable of carrying out the kind of redemptive work that Orthodoxy reserves for Christ and His church. It historicizes and secularizes the story of salvation, transforming the eschatological promises of the New Testament into political promises here on earth. Okay? You with me? Now, and I'll give some examples in a minute here, but historically, Messianism has tended to be associated with the political left in America. It's tended to be a left-wing thing. We need to go find a way to remake the whole world in accordance with American beliefs and American values. Everyone has to be like us. And the poster child he cites for this is an American president. Who might that president be, pray tell? Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson. You can read, I don't want to read you all these Wilson quotes and stuff. We go to a couple pages. Wilson saw the United States as having this historic destiny. Tocqueville wanted to make democracy safe for the world. Wilson wanted to make the world safe for democracy. He wanted to transform the world along American lines. And that was a huge part of his political vision, a huge part of his a large part of his political rhetoric and stuff. I'm trying to look for a quote here, and I'm not seeing one, but if you look on 258, look, 258, second paragraph. Wilson came into office promising a kind of Christian humility in foreign policy. But then it changes. He decides something new is needed. He donned the armor of a crusader and said, I'm just going down the paragraph. What would Christ have done in our day, in our place, with our opportunities? He asked his fellow Protestants in 1905. In 1917, the answer turned out to be make war on the Central Powers, a war that Wilson's messianic temper cast in the most absolutist and uncompromising terms, and that Wilson's fellow progressive Christians rushed to embrace. They're quoting somebody else, not Wilson, but somebody inspired by him next. I have no hesitation, this person's a minister, in saying that the voice of a just God summons us to this war, World War I, and that it is in the highest sense of a word, a holy war. Jesus Christ himself would take a bayonet and grenade and bomb were he here today, attack the Central Powers. Okay, and again, it's not just Woodrow Wilson, we're picking him as a particularly egregious example. But you can accuse lots of other presidents of flirting with this and whatnot. And again, you're walking a fine line here in the sense that this sense of America as a nation with a mission, in and of itself, can be integrated in sort of a Christian framework. but there's a line which you're tempted to step over. Okay? And this is one of the lines, Messianism. The U.S. is charged with using its power, especially its military power, to make all the world just like us, to make all the world just like us. And he says at the end of the page, end of 259 here. Thus utopianism breeds utopianism at home and vice versa. And because there's no need to balance the books in utopia, Wilsonianism tends to be a guns and butter political theology, grasshopper ideology that spends today and let tomorrow take care of itself. Another example of this kind of language, at least, is found in the presidency of George W. Bush, not to be confused with George H.W. Bush. He quotes from Bush's second inaugural address, which was very much about this theme. So you have Messianism on one hand. It's something dangerous. It's something that crosses the line. But there's another heresy. We're back to 255. Messianism's mirror image, Messianism's mirror image is doom-laden and apocalyptic. Not content to note the parallels between the city of Israel and the settlement of America, the apocalyptic view suggests that the American founding was literally a covenanted event akin to the biblical establishment of Israel. We are not just almost chosen, but actually chosen. And our Constitution is not only consonant with Christian principles, but literally divinely inspired. The founding is our Eden and our Sinai. Everything else is a tragic falling away. Indeed, modern Americans, various departures from the wisdom of the founders, places it in the same position as ancient Israel during its flirtations with the gods of Assyria or Babylon. And given these realities, God-fearing Americans must either withdraw from the corruptions of the United States' current Babylonian captivity, or else dedicate themselves like King Josiah to restoring God's law to America. So the task here is either withdraw into enclaves of your own because the world is cracked. Remember the fundamentalists going into the wilderness in Marsden? And most of them came back with Billy Graham, but some wouldn't. They thought that was crazy. So think in those terms, or alternatively, we're not doing that. We're in a crusade to save America. And that means we don't worry about enemies abroad. We focused on enemies at home. The real enemy is here. And America needs to be transformed by us. Okay, and that form tends to be associated, he says, with the political right. Okay, it's normally conservatives people on the right who go back to the wisdom of the founders and talk about how we've lost our old ways and become corrupt and whatnot. Fair enough. We're coming up on a break momentarily. But the problem we have today, because we're not through with today's problem yet, we just laid the groundwork, is now we discover, on the left they've always had Messianism. Now there's Messianism on the right. On the right there's always been this apocalyptic focus. Now we have it on the left as well. Both parties, both orientations tend to be infected by both forms of these deformations. And that's a really good bad thing because there's no ground for the sane to stand on.
No ground for what?
The sane, I said. Or if you prefer, the humble or mere Christians, you're listed. No matter where you stand, you tend to be sucked into both of these things. You escape from one and you get sucked into the other. Let us take a break here. It's 5 up. Let's take a break till 10 after, and we will come back and explore this further.
Through a tea and discovery. I don't know.
I was debating about it, but I found some in my office.
Or just open it up in front of somebody.
Yeah. I don't feel like it's the legal. At least first and foremost, the letters weren't that bad. Those words, I guess I should say.
I thought when I signed up for this class, we'd maybe be learning about some other approaches. You know, it's all just the same author saying the same stuff, just different ways. It's all Christianity. It's like there's other religions in America too.
I thought we were gonna read about stuff that was more modern, I guess.
Are there any snacks anywhere?
Stamps.
Snacks.
There's Coke in the fridge.
I
I have Truman's.
I have a granola bar in my cabinet.
Right, that's right there.
Oh, if they do, bring some back for me.
Okay.
I hurt my knee and now I'm just scared I'm gonna.
Dude, my knee's been hurting so bad for so long. I've given up on doing anything for my body, honestly. Surgery was the last thing I've done. I've decided I'm not gonna get surgery on the other side.
Really?
Look at all these units.
Recently?
Like recently I decided this, is that what you're asking?
No.
Yeah, I decided this yesterday.
That.
Oh, that was good. Neither knew you want one. I brought two. They're new from Trader Joe's.
God, thank you.
You're welcome.
I like your sweater.
Oh,
Are you not like super hot though?
I came up with this sick draft. See if I remember how to do this.
We need to dress up today too.
Yeah. I'm gonna go through. Still James. Are you ready for the whatever we were doing today?
Yeah, what are we doing today?
What pages did you prefer to read?
I mean, I was waiting for someone to
Like in total?
Yeah.
reach out and be like, hey, we're gonna do this meeting and stuff, and then
Damn, girl.
nobody hit me up, so I was like,
We did it on Wednesday.
I don't know.
Did you not get the email?
I don't know.
Email, yeah. We all got email.
I thought this all
What?
was gonna be something
We all got email, right? Yeah.
for this paper.
Didn't you see like this?
I think
Do you have the slides? You have access to slides?
no, I never got that.
Slides, this slide. You didn't got this?
No,
Really?
really? Yeah, I told you no.
Yeah, this. We have the slides made up. Ruby didn't took your email?
My father's a raging atheist. I don't know anything about religion other than no.
Maybe you can see it right now.
Hold on.
Isn't it pretty? So I'm done with my part.
What is this one?
Yeah, she took all of our email and she emailed us. So yeah, you're missing.
We have like half a minute.
I don't know how big they are. So I put them there before I left. Because like they were frozen. And then so they've been in my bag ever since. But I have like a whole pack.
What time did you Yes, you can, but.
First,
It's not only
words
that
are,
position,
I
that's
know
the
you're
other
his
position.
When did you
friend.
get this email?
Dude, literally block her. Block her.
Like,
Yes, we can.
was it the day before?
You don't even
Day
say
before
that
what?
anymore.
I think 2 days before, like the meeting Wednesday. I think she sent the mail like a day later.
No, ignore it.
After
Ignore it.
that.
We had a meeting on Wednesday.
Then like,
Yeah, but that means that you
Bro, block her. Block her.
listen, if it was like some random person.
You have no
that
access to
was in the
slides.
locker room
More
that
of
had
the
like
same.
no earthly connections to it.
No. Well, this is it.
Yes.
I can't.
I see that.
But then there's another old dude too.
Okay,
that I-
avoid it at least until the end of
They bitch about it.
No, it's not.
until the end of class. Don't open it in the middle of class, bro.
So I'm not never mad.
Are you gonna like?
But they're saying it's another old head.
No, I'd rather.
No.
She doesn't have your name too.
Who sent the email?
Ruby.
Okay.
Sure you can.
I think
Ruby,
we
Matthew,
always say
Kennedy,
that.
Maud, Jacob,
Usually the
Rahul.
case
She doesn't have
is
your name. I think
They try to hire people.
What? Oh, sure.
And if
It's
it
long.
goes wrong or something.
she doesn't have your name on this slide
I think
too.
I might have left my wallet at Highmark.
Don't go to master's students. And that's what I'm looking for.
I mean, they should find people outside, like 100% if there's that many, but it's also.
I'm also trying to do
Maybe she.
same
So we'll
tax
figure it
for
out.
college at
Yeah.
home. They have an
Yeah.
online campus. So maybe do same tax online. Is that a
So did you get the
possibility?
email or no?
No.
But still, yeah.
But did you get the, you have the PowerPoint?
No.
No.
Well, you can send it to yourself.
Oh, did you want one?
Luke, are you gonna have to get a new group meet so we can still talk? Or?
You can still message individual people.
Appreciate you.
Yeah,
I
I'd
just-
rather just have your number.
Wait,
Yeah,
wait,
there's
what?
text message.
Can you like send this to me? Actually.
Yeah.
I'd rather just have your number.
Oh, I see. I'm stupid.
Rather not.
Okay.
Whoa.
It's not bad.
Does he have a Substack?
Subscribe to my
What's your Substack, Luke?
I said I'm just nervous because.
Is that place where you can post all your-
I don't think I ever
We
just.
need a second
Oh.
second.
So I have access to. Okay, never mind.
You know what? We could
I just
just
never got an email.
There's some
Yeah.
empty slides, so I don't know what that's about.
Yeah.
we could just talk on Discord.
What is that?
We could do
I have no
Discord.
clue. It's just empty, so I don't know. I can finish
Can
my
you not have friends
slides.
on Facebook?
All 2 of them, so.
Yeah.
Could be me. I didn't do any slide. I didn't get this.
I don't know. We just, it's basically the pros, cons, and whatever. And then, since my part's just the sanction, so I filled out something about that.
Never speak to any of us ever again.
Is this on?
Do you want me to
Google
say the main
Slides.
thing, or can I say
Is
it?
there an app for that?
He has to graduate first.
It might be in your focused or whatever. not.
Trust me, I've been holding shit like that back all day long. Like,
Why?
why? Because I'm not gonna be a dick to Luke.
Yeah.
No, why do you want to say it?
Because it's our dynamic. We give each other shit.
Yeah.
So.
Obviously, and Luke again because we're neighbors. Okay, flip our neighbors.
That's fun.
I mean, Luke unironically said if I failed my thesis, he would give me a lot of shit. So
You set up.
yeah,
Yeah.
People should make it up.
he said if I don't finish, you're gonna give me.
I'm gonna go ahead and trust women.
No, I'm sorry. I'm having a woman moment. I can't. Sorry.
Yes, you are.
I'm having a
Making up
woman
stuff.
moment.
Typical woman. Making up.
Did you know, Max? Did you know that I've never suffered senselessly ever in my entire life?
Me when I don't. Me when I trauma and when I'm
I suffered. When I got my wisdom teeth out.
No, mine was
suffering.
mine was
Or
painless.
When I got
dude.
my LASIK. Ah.
How did you do your Reggies? Did you go under? Or?
There you go. Go.
See, I did the
But now I have LASIK.
I did the probably the worst way to get it out.
Low-key though, I bet you can find some dope ass classes that would go great with your outfits. Get
But-
you some like old-timey.
They just numbed mine and then yanked them out with a wrench. They got part of my
I
bone.
did my root canal.
Yeah, I've had a root canal. They did the same thing.
Was a kid though.
It's like my favorite thing. It's so weird, but
I just hate the sound more than
Yeah.
the pain. Like the drilling sound.
I think I watched some sort of. I think it was Hotel Transylvania 3. They had it playing or something.
I love the Hotel Transylvania.
Yeah, that would be a better song than anything the Eagles have ever written.
The Eagles are probably, in my opinion, like top 5 best rock bands ever.
I saw Stevie Nicks.
Opinion.
I want to see Stevie Nicks.
And the Eagles were the next weekend, and I thought that they might play together.
That would be so cool.
And it
But
was
they did like
the,
surprise collabs on stage. Yeah.
they did have the guy who, what's his name, Warren something, he does Werewolves of London.
Oh,
Oh,
You know about?
yeah.
yes.
Apparently he's like an insane guitar player. And he was the guitar player for her whole album, like Edge of 17. He's the guitar player.
Is that an album or is that a song?
That's the song in the album.
Whatever. So the album that song is on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Warren Zevon.
Yeah, exactly. And then I met this guy named John. He was insane. But it was literally me. This guy was like obsessed with music. 7-year-old dude that I sat right by. We had like a 2-hour conversation about music. And for a while there, I'm like, this guy's literally an alternative universe of me.
No.
Like, the way that he's talking about music and like he's so obsessed with it, it's literally me. And then he goes, I've never had a wife. I never had kids, Max. I'm married to the music man.
No.
And I was like, oh no. Like, now I'm starting to see like
No.
my alternate reality, right? Like looking over at my girlfriend thinking if I leave her or she leaves me, this is my destiny is John.
We gotta start moving the wall.
Right? Well
It's
until
not if you don't want it.
until he says, where do you go to school? I say Texas State. And he says, when do you get your degree? And I said political science. He said, me too.
Oh, only boil water from the ethics.
At Texas State?
Wait, that's actually.
No, not at Texas State.
That's really.
But a degree in political science made my heart drop. My stomach. I said,
Wait.
"Oh, fucking wait."
Wait, you have a degree in political science?
Undergraduate.
From bachelor's.
Who gets a degree in political science anymore? It's so stupid.
This is John though.
Yeah.
Yours is history and.
He does a photograph well. He does a
No.
photograph well.
You talking about my minor?
Your bachelor's.
Are you talking about like just my major?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just history.
No, he did say like, dude, you're just like me. Just
I had a
don't do
minor
crap."
in
Addiction ruins
poli-sci
your life.
and
Meth
geography.
ruins your life.
But like we were on the exact same wavelength. Like he just never grew up past like stoner 20 something, and like was also a musical genius. And he kept being like, man, how do you freaking know this stuff, man? You're a disciple. You're a disciple,
Was he
man.
on crack?
No, we didn't even see him drink that much. I think he's just like permanently like this now.
Yeah.
And like he never did like, I don't think he ever did acid because like how we started our conversation, he was like, I went to that Willie Nelson concert 1979. That was the closest thing to acid I've ever.
Dude, I know some people on acid who just get burnt out. Like their brains are just gone.
Yeah, fried.
Yeah.
But John, and now John's become my best friend. I have his phone number. I'm gonna send him a bunch of music.
See, he has John's phone number, but you won't have mine.
You don't have to worry about being lonely though, because you can always lower your standards.
No, we kept telling John that. Like, but he's like, I don't want a girl who wears too much makeup or like has too much surgery. I said, Brett, you should lower your standards. Like, you're not getting a whole lot of stuff.
Maybe I need to lower mine.
But then he goes, he's like, come on. After we have this like 2-hour conversation, he's like, you gotta tell me you're a Republican, right, man? And I said, hell no.
Hell no.
As liberal as they come. He's like, oh hell no. He's like, oh hell no. I'm like, how are you a Republican?
It's always the crackheads that are Republican.
And
Yeah,
that's
which
it.
makes no sense.
I said, you saw Bob Marley in '76 and you're telling me that you're a Republican? He said, I was like, no way you didn't used to be a Democrat.
You didn't understand Bob Marley.
Now I understand the assignment.
And he said, I was, man, I so was. And
Well,
I'm like,
I
so you
mean-
sold out. And he's like, I'll fight you.
Where
We're just
was
going back and forth. Huh?
Where was that?
New Orleans.
Okay.
And then like every time when Stevie Nicks was playing, he'd look over at me and he'd go, and she'd finish the song and go,
Yeah, she can't really sing anymore.
well, she does have such a distinct voice that it's still like surreal to listen to her sing. But like, he's like, she can't hit the high notes no more. I'm like, bro, she's like 70 something and
She
like
can never
30
really
years
sing that
ago.
high.
Like,
She had that like that raspy thing going on.
Yes.
yeah. And like, that's still like what makes it kind of cool. Like, you still know that you're listening to Stevie Nicks. But he's like, I'm just telling you how good it was, man. He's like, I saw Fleetwood Mac 1982 change my freaking life. And I was like, okay.
Change your freaking life to a Republican?
I don't know when he became Republican. He does live in Biloxi.
I'm sorry, but you saw Fleetwood Mac, the band that's literally a polycule, and you're like, yeah, I just want to be a Republican.
Boomers.
And she got like 5
boomers.
awards.
For 2 hours.
Yeah, and it's okay though because
But
think of
then
how many
we
babies were
talked a
made.
little bit. It was sweet that like multi-generational connections that we're able to have like such a fluid conversation with each other. And even
Right.
though politics was brought up, we both completely put our stances out there. It didn't even deviate the conversation. We didn't even like harp
So
on
take
it.
some precautions.
Right.
Why
And then
don't
we
you
both
wear
had
a
like such a
condom?
connection with music that we're like, well, fuck it. Who
That's a
cares?
precaution.
But then he called me the next day.
You're
when I was back
getting,
home
but that's so
from
close.
And so,
That's
and I
so
just like
close to
lightly touched on
eugenics.
it, and he's like, Max, you know why Trump is good is because.
Get a vasectomy.
Okay, so there's
Yeah.
another reason, not even just Republican.
Well, he's like,
They can get a
he
vote,
can't
though.
be
By
bought.
themselves.
You know, all these people like Pelosi and whatnot are trying to make so much money
You're
off
allowed
of
to.
the government. Trump can't be bought. And I did say, I said to him, I said,
I mean,
Well,
Rachel
John,
doesn't have
you know, I've never
votes.
met
She got one
somebody
and
who had
done. She
that
was like,
money.
yank them out.
Yeah.
and he was like, man, you're kind of right, man. I kind of see where you're coming from. I was like, I don't think anybody has a price limit,
I might skip tonight.
no matter if it's Trump or not. And he's like, okay, I kind of see where you're coming from.
What's the price limit for it?
I feel like there's a lot of.
Because I wasn't paying attention.
I was saying, he was saying that like Trump is good for America because so many people make money off of politics. He already came rich. This is like Republicans, main Republicans
But
stand
he's
on
he
right before they understand that he is. And then I said to him, I said, John, I've never met a man who's like sufficient with the amount of money to pay.
Seven. This is how many bankruptcies my dude has.
Yes.
Like,
And $7 billion been made since presidency. You know, I was like, John,
can you even count to a billion?
that's not fair. And I mean, like, we do the same thing. Like JD Pritzker is also a billionaire. So we're
JD,
saying that
I kind of have beef with him.
we should.
I don't know why.
There's no,
It's just
there's
his
no
vibe
such
is
thing as a
weird.
benevolent billionaire. There's no such thing as
I
a,
love everything.
You do not become a billionaire as a good person.
and that's why Dolly Parton is not a billionaire.
Like one step at a time.
She could
You're gonna keep that.
She has enough, she is the most successful artist. She's more successful than Taylor Swift, but gives more than half of her money away.
Oh, you mean mom?
She could be a billionaire, but she's a good person.
But then that's like, I don't know.
So I'm like, questionable.
It's just weird. It's my buddy after
Oh, it will. 100%. That's exactly what's gonna happen.
No, she has, but my fear is that it's gonna come out the day after I get the tattoo.
Who?
I mean, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's not, I'm
It's, I don't know if she's done some crazy fuck shit, but
She's so
you see the signs now and you don't think that she's gonna get worse.
Yeah, no, I do agree.
Yeah, get the tattoo now though.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, less than a month, guys. I want to get the artist of the whole lyrics, since no means something.
More exciting.
Yeah, Kanye.
So when it makes sense, otherwise.
The lyrics are still pretty anti-Semitic,
Yeah.
Kanye, so I don't know. I don't think you can separate the art from the artist in that.
Going back, right.
Also,
I
I
think
feel
that's what Taylor Swifties
And
are.
with 100% honesty.
Swifties are realizing that they are in their early Kanye stages. That
We're about to take.
you're seeing the signs of your artist switching to another side that doesn't represent what she used to do and what her, right, her,
Big
what
facts.
she stands
Big
for.
facts.
And is switching over, but having a hard time reconciling.
All of the life, all of Showgirl, all of it. Also, why are you?
Life of a Showgirl, like, She is one of the most capitalistic artists that is alive and is changing the whole system for music artists. Like posting every single one of my albums and having an extension to every single one of my albums.
Okay, that's not
Right.
true. There was no deluxe version of Showgirl.
Oh, surprising.
It's because she already said it was shit. There was also no deluxe version for Reputation. She said
But
it
that's
because
what,
nothing else to say.
when Showgirl came out, people were comparing it to Life of Pablo for Kanye, that they said this is when you're starting to see your artist downgrade.
Yeah, like Showgirl the song. Okay. Question mark. Great song, but.
That's a good, take it with a great grain of salt.
Amanda, you're not fucking with it?
I'm not fucking with it.
Okay, like just the way that she's like always like.
But wouldn't it
hanging on
be-
the arm of Brittany Mahomes and Brittany Mahomes
Yeah.
Trump's
Yeah,
biggest
Mahomes
biggest
is
thing
really
sucker.
problematic. That's
Yeah,
also
but why?
because Association through Travis and going to the football game. She
But
can't
you
just-
could have like she could sit next to literally anyone else.
Is that just Travis
May
that's
I
her whole
say,
inner
Opalite
circle?
was a little racist, just a little bit, to me.
Who's Opalite?
The
It's a song and a music video.
Give me where is she? Where's
I
Opalite?
didn't personally find it racist.
Comparing Keela Nicole to
But
the
why is she-
the Blackest Stone.
Why? But like, why is it about Kayla Nicole? Who
It
said
is
it was
about
about
her.
that? Who said it was about
Who else is
Travis?
it about?
Who said it was about
Who else
Travis?
was it
First
about?
of all, who said it was about
Who
Travis?
else was it about?
Really about her past relationships, not Travis.
Yeah, quite literally.
Oh,
First and
Travis's ex-girlfriend.
Oh, is that the
Nicole
talking about
is?
like her past relationships being
Oh, the football player,
the
right?
darkness?
The dumbest, ugliest man I've ever seen.
I do think it's poetic
We got
justice
the vibes,
that
and her
they
father
have
got the
such
vibes as well.
intertwined stories, and that it is yin and yang. Taylor and Kanye.
Don't forget about papers. Yes, paper toppings.
Thank you, give me a moment. Okay, well, when you give me paper toppers while I find where I want to begin. All right, the clock is ticking, so we're gonna have a limited amount of time on the Boulevard book. I'm gonna try to wrap this up quickly, we're almost done.
Is Travis her Kardashian?
Dr. Grasso, you gave me one this time.
There you go.
So I'm gonna have to turn in a paper?
Yes,
Okay. Can I email it to you?
No.
what was, I didn't even hear.
I said, can I email it to you?
Why, won't you be here?
I can.
So,
What? Yeah.
Let's push this back, huh?
I don't think there's much room for the good.
They to do on the 12th, so we push it back to the 11th? Yeah, yeah.
Or how about 3 p.m.?
June?
Yeah. 2:03.
2:03 p.m.? That's not a great number. What about 2:05?
Okay,
Yeah, 205.
206.
2:05 it is.
Does your restaurant hire men?
No. They hire them, but they don't stay for very long. That is true, yeah. No, we've hired a couple of men before in the 10 years it's been open, but it never works well. They keep trying to set the kitchen on fire. The only almost fires in patio built of history have all been men. But yeah, we will hire them,
legally.
legally.
And then you get them out to fire.
Apparently King Charles is visiting White House.
Yeah.
Is he gonna make it?
Is he gonna make it?
Okay. Let's just hope he doesn't get shot at. That would be embarrassing. Anywho,
It'd be pretty mad.
you see the final paper topics there, right? You see when they are due. Obviously, an extension would be a difficulty there. So for some reason you don't think you're able to meet our new 2:05 deadline, okay? Let me know. We need to probably talk about that. Fair enough? We will meet that day. I don't remember what day it is.
The 12th.
I'm looking at the third paper. What is? No. Oh, on the 12th. And we'll meet probably for an hour. It varies a little bit. And just you can hand in your paper and we can chit chat about the course and whatnot. Fair enough? We good? Okay, moving back to our theme. Our problem today, he says, is we have both Messianism and that apocalyptic strand. It's not unusual to find the present. They're sort of, periodic features of American politics, things that are present most of the time. What's new is it's no longer one party's apocalyptic and the other is messianic. And I'm rushing through this quickly, but it tends to be both. Both parties tend to house both of these views, and that's a problem because it leaves no room. They suck up all the oxygen in the room. It leaves no space for people to stand other than these alternatives, both of which are badly flawed. So I'm on page 265. Right after the break. With the example of Bush presidency, this means Bush 2. We come to what's distinctive about religion and politics in our own era. It isn't the president of the heresy of nationalism in both its apocalyptic and messianic aspects. That's been a constant throughout American history. Rather, it's the coexistence of both aspects within both of the country's political coalitions. Okay? The right, which used to be the whole of apocalypticism, it still has it there. It now exhibits a lot of messianism. He uses an example of that. He uses George Bush's second inaugural address, which is very explicitly about our mission to vanquish tyranny and make the world a democracy. But it's found in other places as well. Page 266, second full paragraph, 4 lines down. Barack Obama's campaign for the presidency brought the messianic style back in a big way. Obama might just be the rare kind of attuned being, a writer for the San Francisco Chronicle gushed in the summer of 2008, with the ability to lead us not merely to new foreign policies or healthcare plans or whatnot, but actually helps usher in a new way of being. A new way of being. And then Representative Jesse Jackson Jr. in that same paragraph at the end said that his nomination is so extraordinary that another chapter could be added to the Bible to chronicle its significance. So Barack Obama's political fortunes are as consequential in the overall scheme of things as the events of the Old and New Testament. I mean, if you think about that, that's a pretty bold claim. Likewise, on the left, but you also see on the left apocalypticism, and he talks about that over here. I'm trying to find a passage quickly because I want to get to the other book. I am looking, why don't I see? Oh, here at the bottom of page 266. Whenever liberals have found themselves out of power, this utopianism has been trumped by the paranoid style, which sees fascism lurking behind every right-wing policy proposal. And hears intimations of the apocalypse in every news bulletin, and which has directed the kind of disproportionate big villain venom toward Ronald Reagan and then George W. Bush that had once been aimed at FDR and company. And likewise on the political right, we see messianism there. He cites Ronald Reagan as an example. We thought was tinged with it. And certainly George W. Bush being, the central example. So again, to pull back from the book and try to sum up here, if my pages will flip, there we go. The overall problem we have, there's another chapter in there I didn't bother reading it, but the overall problem, according to that again, isn't too much or too little religion, but bad kinds of religion, corrupted versions of Christianity, which by virtue of their corruption, their distortion, whatever you want to call it, their deformation, prevented from doing the cultural work that Tocqueville saw Christianity doing in his period of time, rather than checking the pathologies of democracy. We have forms of religiosity that promote and encourage them and energize them. Fair enough? And basically that's the conclusion of the book. He talks about we need something better. I was going to talk about the last chapter, but I skimmed it before class and realized there's nothing there really. Let me sum it up. We need to do better. There, I've summarized the final chapter. Okay, on to the Bullivant book. Something we're going to have to treat very, very quickly. Okay? We move on to the world of non-verts here. Okay. Anyone recall offhand what non-vert means? Right, people who go from having a religion, at least nominally, to having no religion. And this is a book which deals with a phenomenon Duthout ignores. And not particularly his fault, it didn't loom quite as large then as it did today. He mentions it in passing. But this phenomenon of the rise of the nuns, he puts it, I believe his number is 25% of the population, much higher percentage in people under 40. Other people put it at 28% or 30% or only 21%. Those are ballpark numbers. Different surveys say different things. This is astonishing because we've never had anything in America like this before. He cites some data, data from the early 1950s. I don't think I jotted down the page, where basically back then that number was 2 or 3%. Now it's multiplied 10 times over. And it's been particularly dramatic, say in the past, say since the year 2000. So the question is, who are these people and what is going on here? And that's the question he tries to very tentative, and why are they this way? How did this happen? These are questions he tentatively tries to answer. I mean, he knows I'm not criticizing him. He says a lot of this isn't clear right now. Based on all this evidence, I'm a specialist in the field. Here's what I think is up. Okie doke. Let's begin by situating the book historically. I think he mentions some of this historical framing just very briefly. Once upon a time, the dominant theory for understanding religion and modern politics, the dominant theory for understanding religion and modern politics, was the secularization thesis, or the secularization hypothesis, or the secularization model. Whatever term you wanted to use, the meaning's the same. The argument was that as societies modernize, they industrialize and become more affluent, religion fades away. Maybe it doesn't disappear, but it diminishes radically. And there are many, many thinkers who held on to and championed this thesis. I mean, it was sort of the accepted wisdom in, let's say 1970. If you were in school studying this, that's what you'd be told. This is the way it works. The more modernity, the less religion. Give people money, build giant factories, create cities. Religion goes down. That was almost universally held. But then in the period, say around the 1970s, I didn't have time to look for an exact date, it is challenged. It is challenged by a scholar who up to now has been its leading advocate. Peter Berger is his name. Not that you necessarily need to know that, and I suspect he's quoted in the book.
Kahneman quotes him too.
Yeah. He was one of the premier, like Herberg was to the 50s, the predominant sociologist of religion. You know, in the later period, it was, if you say the period of the 70s and whatnot, it would be him and Robert Bellah, who we did 70s, 80s, 90s, right? Bella's book on civil religion. Berger announces he's studied the data, he's reading all these surveys, and he has changed his mind. The secularization thesis just doesn't work. It is true it works in Europe. In Europe, you can create a nice chart showing the lines of modernization, meaning affluence, factories, cities, paralleling the line in decline of religion. When one goes up, the other goes down. One goes up, the other goes down. That works really well over in Europe. The problem is it doesn't work elsewhere necessarily. Because as I look at the United States, there is no more thoroughly modernized nation than the United States. And the United States is far more religious than these European countries. And the U.S. isn't only the counterexample, there's evidence from parts of the third world as they urbanize and modernize. So he concludes the secularization thesis is wrong, and he presents an alternative to it. I think about the book, one of his books says, I meant to read one of his books, but I left it on my bookshelf at home. And then Many Altars of Modernity is, I think, his final work before he passed away. So, which is, kind of final summary of his views. Here's where I've been, here's where I am. Now, pluralization. Religion doesn't wither. It becomes more pluralistic. What happens as you modernize, what you get are new forms of religiosity. Some of them simply brand new religions emerging, or new versions of older religion emerging. Some of the old religions simply relocating. With modernization, on its heels comes globalization, right? And his argument is we saw American population of Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims in America grow dramatically between 1950 and 1995. See the Hunter book. What we're going to see is more and more different types of religiosity, pretty much everywhere. You won't, the end of this process, there'll be few religiously homogeneous countries where you can look and say that's a Lutheran country or that's a Catholic country. There's every society is going to become more and more pluralistic religiously. And that's the phenomenon we need to be thinking about, studying about, worrying about its consequences. Not that he thought it was a bad thing, it's not an attack on it, but it's a new thing. What does this mean for us? How is this going to affect our lives? And the pluralization thesis, at some point, I know, let's say the 90s, I don't know, becomes dominant. There's a lot of people who like the older one, the secularization thesis. But probably most scholars by some version of the pluralization thesis. But then comes the 2000s. And suddenly in the United States, which is kind of his example of the pluralization thesis par excellence, the example par excellence of how the secularization thesis does not accord with reality. All of a sudden, we see happening in America what had happened in Europe decades and decades before. Suddenly you get this sharp decline in religiosity. And part of that sharp decline is the rise of the nuns. Hold on. I'm looking at the wrong place. That's why. I'm trying to find a page. I think it's 209 in him. I hope it's 209. Yes. He said, very bottom, my basic thesis, I'm trying to get brass tacks level. Yeah. Quick overview. Namely, the rise of the nuns fueled primarily by an extraordinary 2 or 3 decades of what I've been calling non-version, marks a decisive moment in American religious and cultural histories. It is one that its general contours chimes closely with the insights of several leading religious readers of the signs of the times. And he says, what I'm suggesting is not only verified by the survey data, by people like me who study that kind of stuff, but it's sort of in the cultural air we breathe. So even the religious leaders say, oh yes, something big has happened. Something has fundamentally changed. The coming of the nuns is a decisive moment, a before and after moment in American history, according to Bullivant. And he's not sure, we need to talk about how this happened, why this happened. But to cut to kind of the end, he doesn't, what does this bode for the future? Bullivant pretty much doesn't know. You know, it's a new phenomenon, but that's his whole point. We're in uncharted territory. This is a fundamentally new reality and a fundamental game changer in America's cultural DNA. Up to this point in history, America has been what Tocqueville said it was, a really religious place. The character of that religion has changed over time, but the religiosity remains. Now you have something around a quarter of the population consisting of nuns, N-O-N-E-S again. Somebody wrote on the last paper, N-U-N. I really hope they were teasing me.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so if not, I've got to go back to my office and cry, and I really don't have the time. I have to get to it.
I knew the difference. It was a typo.
Okay.
Yes.
It was you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just saw it on your thing. I was like, why did it say that?
Yeah, well, in any case, I'll try not to cry now, especially in front of you guys. But in any case, it once was a Protestant religiosity, then a Christian religiosity, then a Christian Jewish religiosity. But now you have the nuns. Indeed, the nuns are the single biggest religious group in the country. Whether you accept, if you want to group all Protestants together, they're bigger than the nuns. But if you treat the Protestants as separate churches, Episcopalians, Methodists, etc., it's bigger than any of them. And it's the biggest church in the U.S. for 100 years now has been the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is somewhere in the low 20s. The nuns are the single biggest religious group, and with a bullet, in the sense that young people are much higher than 30%, and older people are going to gradually die off. So the nuns' percentage of the landscape is likely going to grow. And in America, that's 40% or 50% or 60% nun. Is a very, very different place than the world Tocqueville visited, the country Tocqueville visited. Or even America itself, circa, say, 1980. The numbers have been growing, but it really accelerates. Around 25 years ago, all of a sudden it starts exploding in number. And again, this is something that has incredibly big implications for who we are, how we understand ourselves as a people. And we're not entirely clear on what those implications are, or what those, what it's going to mean for all of us. We're going to mean we're dealing with a new and very different reality. There we go. Flip pages. Look at my notes. What has caused this? The short answer is Bullivant doesn't know. He lays out factors he thinks are in play here. Things that he's pretty sure are causes. But whether they're all combined enough to explain it, he is not sure. And this is really interesting because you almost never see a social scientist say, I don't know, I'm not sure. Because they make their living by predicting these trends. And even if they're always sure, because even if they're totally wrong, they'll be forgotten 10 years later. And nobody will remember how they made fools of themselves. I worked in the periodicals room of the library. This is relevant. I worked in the periodicals room of the library when I was an undergrad. And for a year, I had the dinner shift. Nobody showed up. Everyone was eating dinner. So I was alone in this room, and this was pre-internet, folks, pre-digital stuff, with bound volume of periodicals. So I would spend my 4 hours each day reading old issues of Time, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, like the old, which in those days were still going strong and were central to U.S. media. And I learned a rule that I've lived by ever since. It really shook me up. The crude, simplified version of the rule is, how can I put this? The conventional wisdom is always wrong. A more sophisticated version of it is, the conventional wisdom is almost always wrong. That's my qualified, nuanced version. But it just astonished me how many things they predicted about where the country's going to move, what's going to happen, which is totally wrong-headed. But anywho, back to Bullivant. He gives a list of things, actually he gives two lists of things, which is an annoying thing. He gives a list of 3 things, and then he gives a list of 6 things that overlap with the 3 things. So I tried desperately to pull this together a little bit, and I am not sure I did, but we will see here. Let me start off, go back to all page 111. One of the things that causes the nuns to emerge, he believes, is their parents. Remember we talked about the religious revival of the 1950s and 60s, what a huge thing that was. And people were going to church in record numbers and stuff. Remember we also said that people like Herbert are concerned that this religious revival is really shallow and superficial. As people just conforming to social norms. It's not like an upsurge. It's serious belief and serious commitment. Right, so when you look at the data, you start with the grandparents of the nuns. The grandparents were fairly church-going group. There again, obviously not everyone was, etc. All the qualifications, but a high level of religious belief and participation. You go to the parents, then. The parents have a level of belief that isn't as high as the grandparents was. Their level of beliefs are a little lower. But what's interesting is the level of practice is significantly lower. The parents end up being, you might call them Easter Christian, Easter Christmas Christians, or
We used to call those submarines.
submarine. I'm trying to think I had an acronym for the ECO, Easter Christmas Only. So I always thought that was funny. They had their own acronym. But anywho, the point is, the parents were shaped by their grandparents, who had a much higher level of religiosity. The parents had a lower level of religion, still religious, but they were significantly lower level of enthusiasm, commitment, engagement than the grandparents. You get to the kids, and they become nuns in large numbers. And it's not surprising if you track this pattern. You would expect a generation formed by very religious people to produce progeny who were pretty religious. At least some people are going to rebel, all the qualifications. But still, you expect them, the culture by and large, to propagate itself in the next generation. But now you have people being raised by people who are half-heartedly religious. You have people who don't say grace at dinner, people who go to church a couple times a year, people who don't think it's a big deal, stuff like that. Their children emerge even less religious than them. Because you look at the numbers, you look at the non-verts that emerged in the last 30 years, they're overwhelmingly coming from at least nominally religious backgrounds. Okay? Fair enough? Nominally religious, so they really are leaving something. It may be something very nominal, maybe something they did twice a year. But they're leaving something. And whatnot. So that's it. That's the first thing. The previous generation, the shallowness of its religious roots and beliefs, produced children who had no religious roots or beliefs. Next you have, I'm trying to think of what order to do them. Next you have, he calls it the Cold War, so I will go with that. But I think that's a little too, little too simple. Discusses this over on page 113, that big paragraph in the middle. And then again, I'll read you a quote from 124 if I can ever get there, since it's not on 124, it's on 125. The Cold War thought and secular Soviets were replaced by religious extremists in America's anxieties. While prejudices died hard, Americans brought up in the 80s and after exposed to vastly lower doses of anti-atheist antipathy, and thus suspicion towards non-religiosity in general. You with me? I see people. And then, over on page 113 here, the millennials even more so, Gen Zers, in 1997 were brought up wholly or partly after the Cold War had ended, and thus a good generation or more after the peak of paranoia about godless communism. Okay? What's his point here? In America, right, we learned this in Tocqueville. Religion was fueled in part by patriotism. There was this historic connection, right, going back to the Puritans, our Puritan roots, our Pilgrim Fathers celebrated every Thanksgiving, spoken about constantly by politicians and stuff. Okay, though, so kind of innate patriotism acted as additional fuel for religion. It was more fuel you could throw on the fire to make religion burn bright, hot and bright. Okay? In post-World War II America, we enter into the Cold War, pitting the United States and its allies versus the Soviet Union and its allies. Marxism, Leninism is a godless ideology, very explicitly. That is sort of its anthropological starting point. Extremely hostile to religion, and many religious believers, millions of them, found themselves working in labor camps in northern Siberia. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the great Russian novelist, has written some good books about that experience. He didn't end up there because he was a religious believer. He ended up there for other reasons, his political criticisms of Stalin. So this fight between us and these godless atheists, we emphasize we're different from them. We believe in freedom and we believe in God, right? So that is more fuel on the fire, that our political life is dominated by this year in, year out struggle against this atheism that's asked to associate religiosity and patriotism very strongly in people's minds. To say I'm not religious was almost like saying, oh, I'm on their side. It's almost like being a traitor to the country, because we're team God. Their team hate God. Okay? So there is that the end of the Cold War really affected American culture in a row, but made religious belief as an element in the American identity less central and less important than it had been during the Cold War. Okay? So there is that. There is that. Then then another option is a plethora, this is my phrase, a plethora of religions. I don't know why I use that term, lots of religions. All of a sudden, kind of your exposure to other religions expands significantly. Okay? In several different ways. In the big urban centers of the city, just to give an example, remember those of you did not picking this because some of you did a book with me on that, on the Aaron Holt book, or we did excerpts, we didn't do the whole book. People tended to live in these ethnic neighborhoods. You had the German Protestant, neighborhood, they're all Lutherans. 10 blocks over, you have the Irish Catholic neighborhood. A few blocks over from that, you have the Jewish neighborhood. People tended to go to religious, much more so than, say, go to live in religiously homogeneous neighborhoods, go to religiously homogeneous schools. They didn't have a lot of exposure to other religions. But on one hand, but then a couple things come together to happen. On one hand, those old ethnic neighborhoods tend to break up. The birth of the suburbs. My father grew up in an Italian Catholic neighborhood in New York City, where I've never asked him this, but I think I can safely say there was not a single person there who wasn't a Catholic. He moved out to the suburbs, and not that it's a big shocker or something. But the people on one side were Lutheran. The guys on the other 2 doors down, you had a Jewish family. On the other side, you had Episcopalians. And you had some diagonally over on both sides, you had Catholics. There was a lot more mixing there and exposure. Moreover, at the same time, people are moving into more religiously diverse locations. New religions are popping up. The word new in quotation marks. Really old religions, most of them that migrated to the U.S. All of a sudden, you're witnessing the rise of Islam in America, and Hinduism and whatnot, and all sorts of different things. Then let's add in something else to round this picture out. Let us add in the internet. Then let's add in the internet as a game changer, your ability to communicate with people all over the world, your ability to reach out to new people. So you might be growing up and thinking, God, I'm the only one, my family's religious, but I just don't get it. And so to go because they tell me this doesn't seem to make sense to me. Well, back in the old days, that was reality. If you didn't want to be a pariah, you just shut up your mouth and move with the crowd. But now you can go online and discover you're no longer thinking I'm crazy. You're saying there are lots of people like me. So that in turn has reduced religion. You say, why would that be? We're exploring different kinds of religion. Because when you're exposed to so many different things, religions, with so many different takes on things, after a while you don't know what to think or what to believe. I mean, how much time do we have to read the holy books of the great world religions? Each one of us preferably in the native language. People shrug their heads and say, I don't know. Everyone's saying different things. Who knows? That, leave me alone. Don't bother me about this. And then you have another factor in play here. Let me look at it. Okay, let me read some passages from him, and then they're pretty lengthy, and then I will unpack them. Okay, these people who are becoming the nuns.
What page?
Oh, I'm sorry, 111. They've been raised in a cultural world where the right stance on so many of the post-1960s culture war battlegrounds, women's equality, divorce, gay rights, abortion, is largely taken for granted. And even if they aren't in their own families or communities, they certainly are in, to channel Fox News for a moment, the liberal mainstream media, the TV sitcoms, the movies, and pop stars' Instagram posts, punctuated with the hand clap emojis they've grown up with. I've learned, by the way, how to send confetti now.
I learned last week too.
But that's what I learned. My daughter it was her wedding anniversary last Friday. And I tried to mess around to send her something different than my usual smiley face or my thumbs up. And I found how to do that. I was excited. The problem is I might already have forgotten. But anywho, there's an impressive body of sociological literature arguing that the rise of the nuns is in no small measure a reaction against the religious right, organized religion gained influence by espousing a conservative social agenda that led liberals and young people who already had weak attachments to organized religion to drop that identification. Okay? There's quoting someone who's going to qualify that in a minute. He goes on to say, now I'm over on 112 up on the top. There's much truth to this line of reasoning. Nuns do indeed disproportionately hold the kinds of socially liberal values at odds with the traditional family values politic. But personally, I think it's an unhelpfully ideological spinning on what actually happened. The standard narrative here depicts the churches as taking a conservative turn, abandoning the same center ground in doomed pursuit of a morally conservative agenda. But it was not so much the churches lurched rightward on these issues as that significant portions of the wider culture have moved even further away from the kinds of moral positions, not least on marriage and family issues, that used to be held in common with evangelicals, Catholics, and Mormons. In this view, the religious right is not saying all that much different from what the day before yesterday the religious center was saying about gay rights, divorce, sex education, and abortion. It seems that way because the ones doing the judging have shifted far to the left. Is there anything to add on 124? Yeah, I mean, you can just, okay, I'll read it to you. About 125, so I identified as number 3. The cultural fault lines that began obviously opening up in the late 60s kept on widening with new generations socialized into ever more liberal baselines. This created a values gap between traditional Christian views and the wider culture on topics that were very personal to and thus felt very deeply by people on all sides. And I could go on. Well, yeah, I will go on with that. He had something interesting. This meant that while churches tended to be most visible on the conservative side of various battlegrounds, they were also often deeply riven by internal versions of the same debates. This weakened many churches' attractiveness to any one side of the debate. And we go on from there. So what is he saying there? There's a conventional wisdom that says the nuns are a reaction against the so-called religious right. Or to put it in, we'll translate to Hunter's language, the orthodox, right? The orthodox side of the divide. So it's sort of like these churches, came up with these crazy views and people didn't like them, so they moved away. But the churches never changed what they were saying. Most of them. They're still saying in 1990 what they've been saying in 1950. It wasn't they that were espousing something new. It was the culture around them that has changed. It was the culture around them that had moved. Fair enough? And this connects us back with the Marsden book for a moment. Okay? Remember, one of the themes we encountered in Marsden was the breakdown of a certain partnership. The partnership back at the beginning, America was sort of launched. I'm oversimplifying, of course. I'm oversimplifying his oversimplifications. Marsden was, so America was launched by who? Fervent Protestants. Think Puritans, think products of the First and Second Great Awakening. And on the other hand, proponents of the Enlightenment. And they were in the early phases of the Republic, well into the 19th century. They were widely viewed as largely compatible, and they got along well. The reason was they largely said similar things. The reason they weren't fighting is they were more or less on the same page. But over time, something changes. What changes is in the Enlightenment wing of things begins moving away from the churches, begins moving in a new and different and more radical direction. Fair enough? It begins moving against, you might say, traditional Christianity, being Protestant or Catholic, and traditional Christian morality. This doesn't happen, obviously, overnight. It's a gradual process. But by the time you get to post-Civil War America, the coalition is rapidly breaking up, and there's a lot of open conflict there. Okay? And remember, Marsden's story was how some churches, they come to be called modernist or liberal churches, try to meet the Enlightenment guys halfway. We don't want to go as far as you guys did. You guys want to move from 1 to 10. Tell you what, we'll move to 7. We're close enough we can still be buddies. Other churches refuse to budge. They say, we're right, you're wrong, we're saying exactly what you used to say. Now you're saying something different. You had it right the first time. Hence you slide into the world of James Davison Hunter and culture wars, pitting the Orthodox versus the progressives. The Orthodox are heirs to the major Western religions, Protestantism, Catholicism, and Judaism, as well as to the more conservative wings of the Enlightenment. The progressives, on the other hand, they're the ones who are radicalized. Okay? So his point is simply, yes, it does seem that the nuns, the great many of them, are reacting with hostility towards the churches. But the churches themselves are saying what they always said. They're really reacting not just against, say, oh, churches have become so right-wing today. They're reacting against the entire religious tradition. And it's really they're the ones singing a different tune. And what this in Marsden's language is the Enlightenment, as it were, the radical Enlightenment, as he calls it, right, has become increasingly influential and increasingly dominant. Although not so dominant that it can completely win, right? But you still end up in the culture war. Is it Swips tonight, Ella Jane?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, I thought you might be getting up for their meetings. In any case, I'm sure they had their pizza.
Yes, I did.
I don't think they do.
I was just curious. I saw everyone just have a good meeting. So anyway, that is the basically Bullivant's argument. He's not sure of the respective weights of these factors. He's not sure if there aren't other things he's totally missing. But that's the best he can do at the moment. I already told you he doesn't know where this is going or what it will mean. He is confident the number of nuns will increase significantly as a percentage of the population in the next couple decades because of the ongoing momentum. People dying, people being born, growing up. Who are, one more topic, who are the nuns in the sense of what unites them? And they're a very diverse group, diverse culture, socioeconomically. They're diverse in all kinds of ways. But other than being nuns, what do they tend to have in common? Okay? Thing number one is a deep skepticism of organized religion. Hence you hear the phrase, I am spiritual, not religious. There's your quote from the Duthat book, or God Within, folks. So that's number one. Second thing they have in common, if I'm going too fast, stop me. I see people writing and typing feverishly, and I don't want to lose anyone, nor waning minutes here. The other thing they have in common is they overwhelmingly, obviously not exclusively, not unanimously, overwhelmingly advocate an ethic that emphasizes freedom, autonomy, do your own thing. That's very suspicious of authority and very suspicious of tradition.
Then the nuns and who have this in common again?
The nuns.
Like amongst themselves.
Oh, okay.
Nuns among themselves, they share that. Other than that, it's hard to say because some of them are atheists and agnostics, self-identify, they're a small minority. Some say, I don't know what, say, I think there's some higher power, I'm just not sure what. Others say, oh yeah, I believe in God, but I'm just not into churches. Things like, there's always Sheila, right? Remember our friend Sheila? Sheila that woman has become so famous in university classrooms across America, because that's like a standard reference point in all the books. And that is the Bullivant book. At least for our purposes, because we only have about 9 minutes left. Any questions on the Bullivant book? Okay. Couple questions. These are questions rhetorical. I'm not posing them, you put up your hand and answer them. But if you want to, I wouldn't stop you. Okay. Let's see if I can find something in Tocqueville. I forgot to look at the pages. And Sophia, I still have your paper. Don't forget to get it back. Oh, no. Hold on. This may take a minute. Where is my famous quote? Give me a moment, I'm still going to look. I found it. Page 294. I thought it was more like page 300. Silly me.
294, is it?
294 in Tocqueville. Just a one sentence quote summarizing his thinking. It's, not like this new idea or something. Tocqueville says the following: despotism may be able to do without faith, but freedom cannot. Okay? That's Tocqueville's considered view. He does hedge that a little bit. Maybe we could come up with some kind of substitute for religious faith, but I don't know what that could possibly be. How do you in any way, how do you strengthen religious views or spread them or something? That's not really a political thing. But anyway, the question is, Tocqueville believes that. Now, the fact that he says that doesn't mean he's right. It is his considered view of the situation. Is he right? Well, if Bullivant's right, we're about to conduct an experiment to see if he's correct. I'm not sure it'll be a fun experiment, but it'll be a very interesting experiment. I mean, that's, in the sense of, not interesting as in happy interesting. Oh, this is like an amusement park. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because it really is a huge development and a big game changer in America. So that's one thing just to think about and reflect on. Another thing to think about and reflect on is this. We talk a lot about, we celebrate a lot of what I like to call pluralism. A lot of time the term used is diversity, right? We've all heard diversity is our strength. We also have heard that societies require some kind of substantive consensus. There has to be a body of beliefs that more or less everyone buys into for society to function. Now, if that view is right, that you need this consensus, doesn't that suggest there is a limit to how much diversity a society can sustain while still functioning? Forgot to bring the Canavan book. It had your paper in it, Sophia. And I pulled, rather than grabbing the book, I said, oh, that must be there for Sophia's paper. And I left the book back. But Canavan talked about in that concluding chapter, if it's getting harder and harder to make decisions, if it's getting harder and harder for us to cohere as a society and work together, might that have something to do with the degree of pluralism we've achieved? And if so, where the heck does that leave us? How do we fix this? Do we fix this? Or let me put a crude formulation I particularly like because I made it up. How do you have sustained government by the people if you don't have a people? I think that's I used that at a conference a couple of weeks ago. No one even smiled. What? I don't understand.
I felt it.
Thank you. So I should have had you guys
Maybe they're stunned like a pin drop.
Maybe it was so brilliant. Yeah, that was it. That they never heard of it.
Maybe you're just so much smarter than them that they just couldn't keep up.
Okay.
What about civic religion? That's kind of what.
Well, but then we have the discussion of whether or not that actually exists anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, you have the question, are we so broad, can we sustain a civil religion? Because a civil religion, whatever you want to call it, would be a solution of sorts, whether it's a good solution we'd like or not, or is in some bigger sense right and helpful. But those are questions for another day you can debate. But what would you craft the civil religion out of? Because the old civil religion drew a lot of its stuff out of the Bible, out of, broadly speaking, the Christian and Jewish traditions. I mean, a tremendous amount out of them. It didn't simply consist of selected elements. We'll grab this stuff out of Judaism and Christianity, we'll sprinkle in some of our own special sauce and whip this together. Have this new thing. Do we have enough in common to forge a civil religion that has any meaningful content? I mean, we can all agree that we all believe in freedom. And we can all agree that we all agree in justice. I've hardly ever run into someone who said, I'm against freedom and justice. I'm against truth, justice, and the American way. But if we all mean diametrically opposed conceptions of justice, because our consensus is coming in, our understanding of it comes out of different intellectual traditions, if we hold incompatible notions of freedom, depending on where we're getting it from, either the progressives or the orthodox, how do we make this work? You know, I don't know that you have, and I'm going to say you don't, I'm throwing these out intentionally as questions that can't give you a definitive answer to. And I would like you maybe to take some time and think about from time to time as you reflect on our country and your lives. But how much pluralism and what kind of pluralism. Now, I read an interview recently. Wish I could remember where I saw that interview. It was a printed interview. It wasn't like a podcast or where the heck did I see that? Because I wanted to hold on to it. Because it was an interview with a very eminent professor who teaches at Princeton, who I was with at that conference, so a couple weeks ago. And basically they asked me, how do we hold this thing all together? We are so divided. By that they don't mean Republican, Democrat per se, or we disagree on Iran or, healthcare or abortion. We fundamentally divide in terms of our fundamental orientation, our fundamental conception of what a human being is and what human life is all about. Okay, how do we possibly pull this thing together? Because in Tocqueville you can't in that case. So can we do what Tocqueville said we couldn't do? And his answer was to Hammond go on about he has good friends who he disagrees with on politics, and they're good buddies, and they engage civilly in fascinating luncheons and have a dog and pony show where they go to campuses and disagree about everything, but do this in a really nice, polite way while, you're praising their opponent and whatnot and showing complete mutual respect. So they're trying to push him on them. So they keep pushing, but. What about you've acknowledged these fundamental ruptures? What's going to hold us together? He said, well, I know people worry, but we have this procedural consensus in America. Surely we all agree about that. And that will be enough. That should be enough to keep the train rolling, or whatever you want to say. I have a great deal of respect for that person. He is far smarter than me. But that strikes me as dumb. And that, I think that is something he only said because he didn't want to get, he wanted to be upbeat at the end of the interview. Everything's going to be fine, folks. Calm down. So anyway, those are some things to think about. My watch says 21 after. I know you guys don't want to leave. You prefer I can push this through to 7 or 7:30, but I can't do that today because I have to show up, make a cameo appearance at